Relationships matter a lot. We talk about this goal achievement triangle. So if you imagine a triangle on a notepad or piece of paper, on one corner you have goals, on the second corner you have tasks, and on the third corner you have relationships. So in order to achieve my goals, I got to get stuff done. Those are tasks. And I need the help of other people. Those are relationships. When we get stressed, we tend to focus on tasks at the expense of relationships. So I tend to disconnect from people. And I think particularly with the wholesaling profession, because you're out on the road so much, it would be very easy to disconnect from people. What that does, however, is actually make your job harder. And so the job in leadership, I believe, leadership in the wholesaling business, is if people were machines, they wouldn't need leadership. Leadership's job is to do one of a couple things. One, to help their wholesalers stay connected to each other. And two, to help them figure out how to get better. Like, how do I improve, right? So you mentioned, how many people I see this week. So if I see 10 people, that's one thing I can do to drive my results. Is if I see more people, I should hypothetically sell more. But that's not the only variable. The other two variables besides seeing more people that drive sales are closing ratio and sales size. Closing ratio is if I see 10 people this week and 7 of them buy, and next week I see 10 people and only 2 of them buy, the question is, why did that happen? And the third variable is when they buy more. So it's activity, closing ratio, and sales size. And I got to, as the leader of a sales organization, help my people identify which of those is their biggest bottleneck. And then when I help them identify the bottleneck, how do I help them solve for that? And so if I'm tracking activity for the salespeople that I lead, the wholesalers, whatever that might be, and I know that awesome Mike Baker has the best sales size, what I'm going to do is figure out what Mike's doing so I can help my other 9 or 10 salespeople copy that. The nice thing about this business is it's a copycat business. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to come up with something brand new. But what you do have to do is figure out who is the best in my organization at seeing people, who's the best at the closing ratio, who's the best at the sales side, and then I want to copy that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, Awesome Mike. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the show today. I am absolutely thrilled. And I know I say that pretty much every show, and I am pretty much every show thrilled. But today is a really special broadcast because we have one of my original mentors. We have someone that was instrumental, probably beyond their knowing, in my career in the financial services. Now, it is Mr. Chuck Wachendorfer, and let me kind of read off his biography. It's pretty impressive. I'll try to speed through it. But over the past two decades, Chuck Wachendorfer, as partner and president of distribution for Think to Perform, has established a track record of achieving record-setting performance and improving bottom-line results for executives, business owners, and organizations in financial services, technology, real estate, banking, and retail industries. Now, Think to Perform's clients have included American Express, Ameriprise Financial, Comerica Bank, Boston Scientific, United Health Group, the FBI, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, 3M, and the Minnesota Twins, as well as the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Now, Chuck is a highly sought-after national public speaker, and he's been quoted extensively by several national media outlets, including Forbes, Fortune, Investors Business Daily, Dallas Morning News, Detroit Free Press, my personal favorite, the Rocky Mountain News, the Denver Post, as well as many other national TV and radio outlets. And he's been quoted on the subject of leadership and optimizing performance, but none other will be as revered as today's episode, I'm hoping. Now, Chuck is educated. He does hold a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering. That's hard to believe, Chuck, with your charisma. But his postgraduate studies, they actually include the completion of the Harvard Business School's Advanced Management Program, as well as the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. Chuck is an OG, and what I mean by that is one of the original guys to earn the Certified Financial Planner. He's been that since, that must be a typo, Chuck, since 1989. That's like...
they didn't even have electricity back then.
That's back in the 1900s, dude. So Chuck currently lives with his darling wife and their 3 children, and they live in God's country, in Colorado. So welcome to the show, Chuck. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you're gonna have to give me about 5 minutes. I need to go catch my breath and get a cup of coffee after reading that bio. Very impressive, and I'll tell you, you've been impressive your entire career, both in your decision making, in your leadership. And I'm not just buttering you up for a tough question. Actually, I am, Chuck. Here's the tough question for you: John Elway or Peyton Manning? Who do you take?
Gosh. I've actually met both of them. I have to say, I would pick Peyton Manning. Let me tell you why. Peyton Manning is multifaceted. I don't mean in football, but I love Peyton Manning's commercials, TV commercials. I love Peyton Manning on Saturday Night Live, and I had the opportunity to sit next to him on an airplane flight from New Orleans to Denver a few years ago. And I told him, I said, if the football thing doesn't work out, you got a second career as a comedian. So I even though I'm a longtime Colorado guy, grew up in Boulder, John Elway got the Broncos their first two Super Bowls, and I admire the perseverance that he demonstrated because he had some 2 or 3 big losses before he won his first 2 Super Bowls. Personally, I think Peyton would be my quarterback, but you can't go wrong with either one of them.
I know that you're a Broncos fan, and I was interested to hear your opinion on that. And I like the holistic view of it, and as well as I was gonna ask you Red Wings versus Avalanche, but that would have been a pretty.
Oh, it's Red Wings all the way.
Oh, really? That's a surprise.
No, I'm a Red Wings fan. Red Wings turned me on to hockey when I lived in Detroit, and you and I met many years ago, and I've stayed a Red Wings fan. So I'm Broncos, but definitely Red Wings.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm gonna have to take back all those nasty things I was saying about you. But no, you do live in a beautiful part of the country, and you were inspirational. And can you take us back? And this is really for a lot of the folks that you impacted during this time, which I'm going to mention here, myself being one of them. But it was a pretty interesting day back in 1997, and the American Express Financial Advisors market group was number one. They went from last to first under the leadership and guidance of a charming and a charismatic individual, John Hance. And then John did like a lot of folks do, is he moved on to what he figured would be the next level. And when he did that, he left a pretty big vacuum, not only of his leadership, but also management and a lot of financial advisors. And it was kind of displayed, or it kind of looked like you were the leader of a band of brothers that included Calvin Perry and Bobby Whalen, Ken Delgaletto, Brian Knuth, and Mark down in Toledo. What's his last name? I forget his last name. But that was a pretty daunting and pretty, pretty interesting time there. Can you give us a little reflection back on that now that it's 21 years later?
Yeah, absolutely. It was certainly the biggest test of my career at that point. It was probably the most screwed up place in American Express. Just a little bit of context, John Hance, who still runs the Hance Group there in Michigan, he's obviously, 20 years later, built a very successful business there as a result of this event back in October '97. But I was a peer. John and I were peers. I ran the market group in Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico, and John had Southeast Michigan and Northern Ohio. And I was at Harvard at the time. So fall of '97, I was at Harvard getting my executive MBA. And I walked into the class one day and sat down next to one of my classmates, and he slides over a copy of the Wall Street Journal. And he says, "Hey, your company's on the front page of the Journal."
Yikes.
And that's how I learned about the decision by John and his team to break off and start their own firm. So John took 25 managers, about 130 or 150 advisors and staff, and they all quit on the same day in October '97, and they decided to start their own firm, which is now the Hance Group. And at the time, they were trying to move 20,000 clients and $1 billion in assets. And all of this was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I still had probably a couple of months yet at Harvard. When I got back from Harvard in December of 97, my boss was there to meet me because I'd been out of my role for about 4 months while I was at school. And we're there about 7 o'clock in the morning, and he asked me again if the journals that arrived at our office, and I said, yeah, probably had. So we walked out to the lobby together, got the journal, and he opens the journal, and there is my boss on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And I'm reading the article about him and all the background stuff that went on and all of the investigators they hired to uncover what John was doing or not doing that was legal or illegal. And as I got done reading the story, over my boss's shoulder, was his name Steve Kumagai, Steve turns to me and says, what do you think about going to Detroit? And this is like, Monday in early December. And I looked at him and I said, Steve, we're in Denver. I said, I'm getting ready to go skiing this weekend. So, why would I move to Detroit? I said, but I'll do this. I said, I'll ask my wife. She's from Michigan. Just to kind of humor him, and I'll see if she'd be interested in going to Detroit. So the next day we're back in the office, and he looks at me and says, "Did you talk to your wife?" I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did talk to my wife." He said, "Well, what did she say?" I said, "Well, she'd be open to going to Michigan," and that started this whole conversation around me coming to Detroit to fix what was as I said, the most screwed up place in American Express. I took it for a variety of reasons. I think, and we'll talk some about this today, I'm guessing, is values drive our decision-making, right? So in our business at Think to Perform, as Mike said, we work with executives, athletes, and business owners to improve decision-making under pressure. And what you can know is performance in any area of life. I don't care what you do for a living, where you live, the color of your skin. It doesn't matter, male or female. Performance in any area of life is a function of three things. It's a function of talent. So talent being things that we were always good at and can never remember learning, things like math or music or sports. Skills are part number two. So skills are things I develop over my lifetime. So I may have had a talent for music, but I developed a skill to play the piano. And decision-making is the third part. So talent plus skills plus decision-making equals performance. And of the three, decision-making has twice the impact on performance than talent and skill combined.
Chuck, I got to interrupt you, brother. And I got to give you kudos because that is verbatim your presentation. I've watched it a few different times. Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck is all over the internet providing tons of free content and value. And that is verbatim. Talent plus skills plus decision-making equals performance. But decision-making is the thing that they really help with at Think to Perform. But let me kind of pull you back in a little bit, Chuck, and ask you, and that's why I brought up the Hans Group. Now, back in the 90s, wasn't that the way we did business? Wasn't it kind of non-emotional, cutthroat, and go for the gold, everything's about the brass ring? Was that how it was back then, or was this just a was it just John and his team's kind of style?
No, John set the tone for really many leaders, including myself at the time. John was very forward thinking. He was very outside the box, challenged a lot of conventional thinking, and that was good, I think, because at the time, what was then IDS and now Ameriprise was fairly traditional. It was a 100-year-old company. It was fairly set in its ways and was moving fairly slowly at the time. And so John, for a number of years, tried to help accelerate the pace of change, and I think eventually got frustrated with that, which prompted him leaving. And so for me personally, in taking over the market group, I was a bit conflicted because John at the time was a friend of mine, but I also was interested in the challenge, and challenge was one of my, challenge and adventure were two of my important values at the time. So I knew if I fixed that, not only would I be well off financially, but I would have kind of written my ticket to do whatever I wanted at American Express and then anywhere else in my career because of the turnaround. And so we did that. We fixed the region. We took it from last after John left and took 150 people with him. In 2 years, we were back to number, I think, 3 or 4 in the company. We had no managers at the time, so I had to hire, as you mentioned, the 5 VPs, Ken, Mark, Bob, Calvin, and Brian. And then we had to hire, from scratch, 25 new managers and, at the same time run the business. So it was a daunting challenge, which we spent 24 months turning around. And the culmination of it was to be on the stage at the National Conference for American Express in Hawaii. So that was really like the pinnacle of my career at that point.
Yeah, you did a great job with that. In fact, you've impacted the lives of many people, and some even positively, Chuck. And
good.
and before
meaningful work is one of my values, so that's important to me.
I did read that about you, and and I admire that. And just before we get off of the topic, though, this was not intended to be disparaging whatsoever to John Hance or anybody in his organization. I have the utmost admiration and respect for them. They choose a certain type of business model to run, and the great thing about America is that you can do that. If you want to run a business a certain way, you can do that. And you can also do it another way. Now, what really is attractive about your methodology, though, is that it is a little unique, or probably is very unique. And for the wholesalers and the financial advisors that are listening here, they're going to be able to kind of uncover maybe some interesting things that they wouldn't have expected. For instance, here's one. And Chuck, I read you said this. You said that basically, in order for me to build a great relationship with you, the person I have to pay attention to is my favorite person, me.
That's right.
Can you explain that? In order for me to build a great relationship with you, the person I have to pay attention to is me, because that's contrary to what the mainstream is saying. Mainstream is saying value first, be a giver, have gratitude, and take care of your client. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't think it's inconsistent with what you just described. The underlying, or one of the underlying philosophies that we operate under is to improve my leadership effectiveness. So think about leadership. Leadership is about influence. If I want to influence other people, influencing other people begins with me doing a better job of managing my own behavior. So you think about people who don't have great relationships, aren't very good at influencing others. Typically, it's because they do a poor job of managing themselves, and managing oneself is grounded in self-awareness, right? So here's the fly in the ointment. The fly in the ointment is people who are not self-aware, of course, don't know it. Otherwise, they'd be self-aware. And so to your point, I got to pay attention to what's going on for me so I can do a better job of managing myself. If I do that, I become more effective with other people. My influence and effectiveness with others increases. We talk about and you may remember this too, this 3-bucket theory. Everything in life falls into one of three buckets. Bucket number 1 is what I can control. And the only thing that we can control is our own behavior. There's nothing else that goes in that bucket. Bucket 2 is what I can influence. And that's like my relationships, my health, other people. And the better job I focus on part 1, my behavior, the more my influence grows in bucket 2. And bucket 3 are the things that we can't control. Things like the weather, the economy, traffic, the stock market. And successful people tend to focus on bucket 1 and let go of bucket 3. When we become victims in our lives, it's because typically we're focused on bucket 3. Why is this happening to me? What's going to happen in the stock market? We work in a field called behavioral finance, which is related to financial services. The dominant factor in portfolio growth, not portfolio performance, the dominant factor in portfolio growth is saving and investing behavior. That's a pot 1. So I can control how much I save and invest and how long I stay invested. If I do that, that accounts for 87% of portfolio growth. The other 13% is investment selection, asset allocation, and market timing. So there's a lot of correlations here to me focusing on my own behavior. I become more effective with other people. I have more money, if I control my saving and investing behavior. So,
It's interesting because back in the day, I could clearly remember being in that little, what was really a closet in Ann Arbor, which was called the bullpen, and making my outbound calls on a phone with the cord on it still. I wish I had that phone. I made a lot of money on that with that phone, actually. But you and Doug Lennick, you kind of promoted this acronym, which was Woody Woofy. What do you want for you, kind of a thing. And that it sounds like that's what you're talking about, is being aware of what I want and what my behaviors are, and then if I focus on those, I can have better success, as opposed to focusing on things that I might be able to influence or that I can't control. Now, I set that up, Chuck, because as you know, most of the audience here are wholesalers. So wholesaling is an indirect sale. I don't actually get to see the client write the check. So how would you advise wholesalers to focus on those things that they can control, as opposed to the ones that they can only influence or not control? Normally, we try to use that influence. I try to influence an advisor to use my company's product, versus using it myself, kind of a strategy. So.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike, and it plays into what we were just talking about. So if I want advisors comfortable and confident, so if that's the emotion I want to create in them so that they go sell my product. So comfortable and confident are emotions. That's what I want them feeling. And what I want them doing is presenting my product to their clients. And I want them thinking this is the best solution to their clients' issues or challenges. Then what I want to be thinking about to this whole controlling my own behavior is, how do I then have to be? So if I want advisors, the people I'm dealing with, to be comfortable and confident in promoting this to their clients, and I want them to think that this is a great option or solution to their clients' issues, then I want to be thinking about, what do I have to be feeling? What do I have to be thinking about? And what do I have to be doing? So as human beings, we're always thinking, always doing, always feeling. And we're that outside influence for other people. So how do I then have to create trust and confidence in other people, so that they understand my product, they're confident in my product, and they know it solves their clients' and prospects' issues? That's what I can control. I can control how I am. And I think it's difficult. We talked about this before we got started here today. As wholesalers, you got travel. I mean, you're running either on an airplane or a car or something, train, from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and sometimes things don't go well. Right? I had an issue last week. I was in Louisiana, where my flight got delayed and I missed my connection, and I got 4 hours of sleep, and I had to spend all day Thursday speaking on 4 hours of sleep. And so what I had to do, as an example, was I had to raise my game. My client didn't care that I was tired, and I wanted my client feeling like this was the best experience ever. And so that's the same, like, as you're going from meeting to meeting to meeting, you're going to have things that don't go your way, that are frustrating. And we've got to be able to, like, wipe that slate clean, walk in fresh, and create that confidence and that comfort in our product, so that people leave whatever the 15 or 20 minutes they have with me feeling like, this guy knows what he's talking about. I can call him or her if I have questions. And this is a really good solution or option for my clients and prospects.
It's well said. Appreciate you saying that. And I have a little trick, and I've said it before on the show. I'll share it with you, though, Chuck, and the audience again. When someone asks me, what do I do for a living, I don't tell them I'm a wholesaler, because unless you're in the business, you don't know what that is. So what I say is that I am a spokesman for an investment company. And that has served me so well that I cannot tell you. That might be one of the best things I've ever done for my career, Because now when I'm getting up to go to work, I don't view myself as a wholesaler. I don't view myself as Mike Baker. I view myself as a spokesman for a
Mm-hmm.
company. And I go out there and I put the tie on, and I put the, the bag over my head so I don't scare anybody, But anyways, I put on the role as a spokesman, and it's really helped me a lot throughout my career, to kind of game up. And I think that's what you're talking about doing, is if I can control my own comfort and confidence, then the advisor will pick up on that. And as long as the solution makes sense, they can use it with their clients then. So I appreciate you saying that. Hey,
I heard my son is on the U.S. snowboarding team.
We're going to talk about Ryan.
Shout it.
Don't steal my thunder.
Okay, well, I was going to use. I heard Shaun White's coach. Shaun White's been the dominant snowboarder for the last 10 or 15 years. I heard Shaun White's coach give a talk one day, and he said Shaun always, no matter what, gives his best. And when you always give your best, you then don't have to worry about whether or not this is one of those times. And so I think that's what you're saying, is you're always, always, always giving your best. Now, that's different than being perfect, but I will always give my best. I won't always necessarily be perfect, but I will give my best.
Yeah, Chuck, it's funny. One of my friends, she just posted on social media, I call myself Awesome Mike, and I use awesome as an acronym, just kind of like Woody Woofy, or Weati, or the other ones that we've come up with over the years.
Yep.
But awesome stands for, the A is for your activities, and W is for the who, the what, and the why. E is for your emotional language indicators, systems. I have a system.
I didn't know you had an acronym. I didn't know awesome was an acronym. I learned something today.
Yeah, it truly is. And, Magic Mike was already taken, so I come up with Awesome Mike, right?
Uh-huh. Right.
Anyway, so she posts on social media that all of her friends are flawsome. And flawsome is an adjective that says that even though you realize that you have flaws, you still are awesome. And that really kind of resonated with me. I don't know that flawsome Mike sounds as good as awesome Mike does, but ideally is if I do my best every day, that's all I can control. I really can't control the outcome. I can't control the sale. I can do my best to be confident and to be a good spokesman. I can do a good job to try to influence that advisor to produce my, for my company's product. But I really can't control whether that buyer is going to buy or that advisor will do it directly. So I appreciate that, and that's a good thing for our wholesalers and financial advisors to hang their hat on, is to just do your best every day. And then, and Chuck, people think linearly. Like they think that, my closing ratio is 7 out of 10, so it's always going to be that way. Well, it's not. In fact, this week it's going to be 2 out of 10, and next week it's going to be 10 out of 10. Things happen exponentially. People just think linearly. So I appreciate you saying that. And if you consistently, just try to do your best, I think it's going to really show up. Now,
well, I assumed you had Awesome Mike Baker, because if you put awesome in front of your name, you can't be anything less than awesome, right? I mean, so you kind of set the tone for people's expectation. Like, if you're going to put it out there, you got to deliver.
Yeah, that's so true. And then, so as I've done this, I've been calling myself Awesome Mike for a couple of years now, and I've had the haters, and maybe they're the realists, that have told me, dude, really? I mean, like, we knew you back in the day. And I said, well, guys, awesome doesn't mean awe everyone. It's just awesome. Hey, Chuck, leadership is big, and especially with wholesaling today. There's a lot of churning going on. There's firms that are laying off their entire field territory rep or wholesaler forces, and then there's new ones that are coming in the marketplace. And one of the things that your company, and Janet was speaking when I heard this, you guys were doing a joint presentation. But you said these words, and this is really for my national sales managers and for my divisionals, the managers of wholesalers. You said this, and I want to ask you to explain it in detail. It's pretty obvious what you mean, but I'd like to hear the details of it. You said that we grow as in a company. We grow by retaining people, not by recruiting. We grow by retaining people, not by recruiting. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I'll back up a little bit. Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, Built to Last, talks about getting the right people on the bus, right? Which is all about selection. So if I get the right people on the bus, everything's fine. And that's not necessarily true. So what you can know is development matters more than selection. I'm not saying selection doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter as much as development. So I can hire somebody who's really talented and got a lot of great experience, but unless I develop them, because the way things are done at my company, my product, our market, our differentiators are going to be different, even though you may have, tons of experience with a competitor in financial services. And so I got to develop the people that I'm hiring. Recruiting is important, but it's not as important as retention, and retention is driven by development.
Yeah, it's well said. And, you'd mentioned that, and wholesalers kind of can be lone rangers. We can kind of be, it's one of the loneliest jobs that there is, because you're really out there. And even though I'm friends with this advisor, I'm seeing them once every so often. So it's a very lonely career. If
it is,
but it can be troublesome. But you mentioned that excellence in performance it comes from essentially working as a team together. It comes from, and I assimilate it to the Army. I spent 12 years in the service of our country in the Army, and
sure,
I still am friends with the guys that I was with back in 1989.
Not bad.
I went in when I was like 10 months old. But back in 1989, when I was over there tearing the Berlin Wall down, those are still my closest guys, because we struggled together. We had each other's backs in the pursuit of an honorable work. So
right.
I think to perform, do you guys have a similar philosophy when you help companies, right? You try to help the retention and development of people, but then also do you have some way that maybe even wholesalers or financial advisors could kind of create their structure so that they actually work together in a sense of harmony, as opposed to call it a competition, scarcity base?
Absolutely. And I think you're touching on something that's really important to life in general. Relationships matter a lot. So we talk about this goal achievement triangle. So if you imagine a triangle on a notepad or piece of paper, on one corner you have goals, on the second corner you have tasks, and on the third corner you have relationships. So in order to achieve my goals, I got to get stuff done. Those are tasks. And I need the help of other people. Those are relationships. When we get stressed, we tend to focus on tasks at the expense of relationships. So I tend to disconnect from people. And I think particularly with the wholesaling profession, because you're, out on the road so much, it would be very easy to disconnect from people. What that does, however, is actually make your job harder. And so the job in leadership, I believe, leadership in the wholesaling business, is if people were machines, they wouldn't need leadership. Leadership's job is to do one of a couple things. One, to help their wholesalers stay connected to each other. And two, to help them figure out how to get better. Like, how do I improve, right? So you mentioned, how many people I see this week. So if I see 10 people, that's one thing I can do to drive my results. Is if I see more people, I should hypothetically sell more. But that's not the only variable. The other two variables besides seeing more people that drive sales are closing ratio and sales size. So closing ratio is, to the example you gave a few minutes ago, is if I see 10 people this week and 7 of them buy, and next week I see 10 people and only 2 of them buy, the question is, why did that happen? And the third variable is when they buy more. So it's activity, closing ratio, and sales size. And I got to, as the leader of a sales organization, help my people identify which of those is their biggest bottleneck. And then when I help them identify the bottleneck, how do I help them solve for that? And so if I'm tracking activity, for the salespeople that I lead, the wholesalers, whatever that might be, and I know that awesome Mike Baker has the best sales size, what I'm going to do is figure out what Mike's doing so I can help my other, 9 or 10 salespeople copy that. Right. The nice thing about this business is it's a copycat business. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to, come up with something brand new. But what you do have to do is figure out who's the best in my organization that's seeing people, who's the best at closing ratio, who's the best at sales side, and then I want to copy that.
Chuck, I'm going to actually respectfully, offer a counterpoint for you there. And as I'm still wholesaling today, like I have meetings today, and I call it, like the old idea of the 4 types of activity: face-to-face, phone call, email, and snail mail. Those are the 4 major wholesaling activities. That's wholesaler 1.0, and I'm looking to get to 3.0. And 3.0 is scalable. It is easily repeatable, and we're talking about things like social media. We're talking about things like this podcast. We're talking about things that and maybe I'm the I'm the oddball out of the forward thinking guy, whatever it is. But I do find that our industry is evolving. The wholesaling industry, even financial services industry, is evolving, and I believe that that. And maybe I'm misunderstanding. Maybe you're saying something to the effect of you need to copycat what you can control, copycat the integrity, and we're going to talk about level 5 integrity, your activity success ratio and revenue per client. Those ideas that you're talking about, those are probably more evergreen principles than a technique like, oh, should you do a drop-in versus only doing group lunches. And I'll offer for your consideration in the audience is that there is more than one way to wholesale. And I believe
absolutely there is.
Yeah, I believe, there's some wholesalers that are really great in front of a crowd standing up doing a presentation. And then there's other ones that are really great one-on-one, and to be world-class at both is very, unlikely or difficult. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the idea to let me get in maybe a counterpoint there. One idea though that I think I hear resonating with you, and this is one of your teaching points, is to align my real self with my ideal self. Align my real self with my ideal self, and I took that note when we were talking about self-awareness. So can you speak to a little bit how a wholesaler, financial advisor can first of all recognize their real self, and then how they can move towards their ideal self, Chuck?
Yeah, and I think that does contribute to improved decision making. So we talked about values. Values are things we use to make decisions every single day about time, money, and resource. And most people, when you ask them, do you have values, will say yes. When you ask them to name what those values are, it gets kind of fuzzy. People will name like family, honesty, integrity. And so we help people understand at a real clear level what their top 5 values are. So my top 5 values are family, integrity, health, meaningful work, and spirituality. That's who I hope to be on my best day. That's, as you mentioned, my ideal self. Unfortunately, part of the human condition is none of us is perfect. So what I have is my real self. That's what everybody else sees. Those are my thoughts, my feelings, and my behavior. And when I get clear on my values and I pay attention to my behavior, and we talk about an exercise we call the freeze. The freeze is, what am I thinking, feeling, and doing right now? And sometimes what I notice, what I'm thinking, feeling, and doing is disconnected. So for example, when I'm talking on the cell phone and driving my car, my thoughts and emotions are on the cell phone conversation, and my actions are driving the car. So when I'm physically present driving the car and mentally absent on the phone conversation, that affects my performance, which is why when I talk on the cell phone and drive my car, my probability for getting into an accident goes up. Athletes talk about being in the zone. That's being physically, mentally, and emotionally present. So if you're having me on this podcast today, you want me paying attention to the podcast, not thinking about my next meeting, not thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch, not thinking about what I didn't do yesterday. So, in order for me to be at my best, I have to be fully present here. The same would be true for any of your interactions with your clients, your prospects, is I want to bring my full presence to that interaction. And back to what I was saying earlier, I want to decide ahead of time how I want to be when I'm with my next meeting, when I'm with my next advisor or group of advisors. And that's intentional. I get to decide to do that, but I got to play the freeze. That's, what am I doing right now? And be clear about who I hope to be. And if I notice I'm out of alignment, what I can decide to do is one of two things. I can decide to become aligned. So if I'm not in a great mood, how do I get to feeling better quickly? Or I can decide not to do the event if I'm not feeling well, because I don't want to influence the outcome of that situation negatively.
Wow. So to quote, I don't know who it was, but there's a gal in the voiceover, but she said, "The next time you are stressed, say freeze for success." Now, Chuck, that's awesome. Do you have some tools that wholesalers could use, or to identify our top 5, values?
Sure. You can go to our website and take the exercise for free. It's thinktoperform.com, think the number 2, perform.com, and you can take it. There's a virtual card deck there. My daughter actually just did it. She's 20. She lives in LA. She was having some career decisions that she was having to make, and she was talking to me about her alternatives. And she said to me, and every parent, you hope that some of what we say gets, sinks in. She said, "Dad, I'm going to go to your website and do the values exercise. For me and my business, what I do, it was like music to my ears." So you can go to the website, probably take you 10 or 15 minutes to do the exercise, come up with your top 5 values. If you want, you can also, we have freeze alerts that can be sent to your cell phone, your text messages. You can have them sent 3 or 4 times, 5 times a day, which help improve your self-awareness. So by improving my self-awareness and me knowing my values, I become a better decision maker, and that impacts my performance.
So I missed that. You said it's a freeze, like you're going to text me a few times a day for me to freeze and kind of annotate. That is awesome. What's it called again? A freeze alert or freeze?
It's a freeze alert. So if you send
that's awesome.
an email to info@thinktoperform.com, info@thinktoperform.com, and say, "I want to set up a freeze alert to my cell phone." Somebody from our office will contact you. You'll give them your cell phone number. We don't do anything with that number. And you'll be able to set up your own freeze alerts. I have 3 a day sent to my cell phone. It actually has a separate tone that goes off that helps me practice this freeze. We teach this same exercise, by the way, to doctors and nurses in surgery. So any member of a surgical team can they call it a pause for cause. They can call it freeze. And it's everybody on the surgical team checking in with, what are you thinking, feeling, and doing? Now, if you're in the operating room and you're on the table, the question is, why would I want somebody calling a freeze? Well, because one of the biggest risks in surgery is a distracted surgical team. They work on the wrong body part, doing the wrong medical procedure. So if I'm on the table, I want everybody focused on me and what they're supposed to be doing, not distracted.
That's a great tool. That's a great tool. Wholesalers, you're welcome. Once again, just pure gold from Mr. Wachendorfer here. Thank you very much for that, Chuck. Hey, you mentioned your lovely children, and every 20-year-old needs to be looking at their career options, like your fast forward young lady daughter there has. But I wanted to ask you, you've got her, she's successful. You have Ryan, who is call him a blossoming, and he's already blossomed. Awesome dude, wholesaler, and snowboarder, which is often synonymous.
He is an awesome dude snowboarder.
Yeah. But I want to ask you this. A lot of wholesalers are out there, and we sacrifice a lot of time with our family in order to try to provide for them. So, do you have any tips, or maybe even some alerts or regrets? I know you travel quite a bit yourself. Some kind of commentary on how to raise successful kids in this career.
Yeah, my kids are. I always qualify that when somebody say, "How are your kids doing?" And the qualifier is, to my knowledge, they're doing fine, right? So that can change with children, and there have been times with all my kids that it has not gone as well, and so thankfully, knock on wood, they're all doing great. I think I travel as well, maybe not as much as a wholesaler, but one of the things that travel is part of many careers these days. I have to work extra hard at staying connected to my wife and family when I travel. And so number one, so things like text messages, phone calls, note cards, flowers, like all those things. We don't want to take those for granted. They do make a difference. They do let people know that we appreciate them, and it helps us stay connected. The second thing I do is I try and manage my travel. So my goal is to be gone no more than 6 nights a month. And the way I got to 6 was I tried 10, I tried 4, I tried 8, I tried 2, and 6 seems to be the number that works for me in my business, works for my family. And there are some months where I'm right on 6. There are some months where I'm at 10. So, for example, in this month, I will be gone more than, I don't know how many nights I'll be gone. It's probably more like 12. And what I'm doing is I'm taking my wife and daughter with me to travel. Now, I can do that. Not every family can, but that's an example of how I try and compensate. So if I'm gone more this month, I try and be gone less next month. Or if I'm gone more this month, I try and take my family with me. And I think it's about staying connected, because if we're not connected, I don't care who you're married to, the relationship frays over time. And I know I've been married 27 years. My wife has put up with a lot for me. And, there have been times where I was more disconnected than I should have been. And so I have to keep that top of mind if in fact family is one of my values.
So would you say that the quality of the connection is more important than the quantity, vice versa? Is it a mix?
Somebody told me years ago, and I don't remember who that was, that quantity matters with children. Like the whole, quality over quantity is really a myth. And I heard an interview with Christine Lagarde a few years ago. Christine Lagarde is the woman who runs the International Monetary Fund. She decides which third world countries get loaned money to help their economies develop. The person interviewing her, she's a mother raised by 3 kids. She was a successful attorney. Now she runs the International Monetary Fund. And I think the person interviewing her said, "Gee, you've had it all. Like, is it possible, like, for somebody to have it all as you appear to have had in your own life?" And she paused for a second. She said, "Yes, just not all at the same time." And so, I think you have to consider, if you want to have a successful family, how you being gone impacts them. And like, what can you do that's within your control to compensate for some of that? And sometimes you get it right. Hopefully you get it more right than you get it wrong. But it's considering all aspects of my life. Because if I only focus on business, then everything else in my life will suffer. My health will suffer. My relationships outside of work will suffer. And I'll find myself successful in business. I may have a pile of money, but I'm by myself. And that's not a great place to be. So I think the hard part is, how do I be successful in all aspects of my business, and all aspects of my life, which include my business? And that, frankly, is more sustainable. Yeah, right? So how do I balance all that? It's also more difficult.
Absolutely. Words of wisdom. Appreciate that. And a lot of wholesalers have their own version of that. And it is definitely one of the most daunting parts of it, is to try to balance all of the different facets of your life, both personal and professional. You were a big inspiration to me. In fact, the first time I had ever got a ride in a Porsche was yours. if you recall that.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a classic Porsche that you loved to test the brakes around Metro Detroit, in fact. But we had a good time
Mm-hmm.
once driving from a meeting. And along with that, my first interaction with a wholesaler was with none other than Mr. Dan Williams. And
Yes, I didn't know that.
yeah, I was early to a market group meeting once that your team was hosting, and he was there setting up, and I was literally the first person, and I pulled up a chair at the back of the room, and this guy, Dan Williams, made a special effort to walk over to me, and I was a nobody, and to shake my hand and ask me, "How are you doing?" And really demonstrated to me what a wholesaler should do from the very get-go. Want to give a great big old hug and kiss and shout out to Dan. He's just recently joined your great team.
He has, yeah. We're lucky to have him.
Yeah, he is an inspiration. He's a career wholesaler and a great all-around guy. Seems like there's a lot of those guys from Minnesota that are pretty great, in Colorado too. But anyways, want to give a big shout out to Dan. And can you Chuck, can you kind of tell us what is Dan going to be doing at Think to Perform? And a lot of us are his brothers in the field, want to keep tabs on him. So what's he going to be up to?
Yeah, we are growing. I mentioned my travel schedule in November. I'm spending most of the month in Canada. I'm going to be in Calgary, Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. So our firm is growing rapidly. Some of you may know that our behavioral finance course sits on Kaplan's platform. Kaplan is now taking that course global to Australia. We're helping it go to Canada. We've had interest in Europe and Africa. And so our vision at Think to Perform is to enhance the world by improving the decision-making and performance of the individuals and organizations we touch. And so we crafted that vision statement pretty carefully, and we use that in guiding our decision-making along with our values. And so Dan is going to help us carry out that mission. He understands financial services. He's got young children. He wants to take his career in a different direction. And so we were lucky to get Dan. I think we met him, one of my colleagues met him at an event, and really just jumped on the opportunity as soon as we found that he might possibly be willing to make a switch. And so he's going to help. He's great in sales. He's great in front of people, as you mentioned, Mike. So he's going to be able to help us carry the message around decision-making and performance. He's going to be able to help us carry the message around behavioral finance. He'll be doing some coaching and speaking himself. He's been with us probably a little over a month now.
Yeah, great. Well, best of luck to him and to
I'll let him know.
Yeah, indeed, and to you as well, of course. Before we switch gears, though, and kind of bring this podcast episode home, I wanted to ask, are you guys still doing that Evolution of Financial Advice conference? And is that a way that maybe wholesalers or financial advisors can kind of plug into some of the manna that you guys provide?
Absolutely. We actually just finished our third annual conference about 2 weeks ago. It was the 24th and 25th of October. And we've been holding it in Minneapolis. This last conference, we had 170 people. We had about 35 or 40 different financial services firms. And it's really, the conference is really about where's the industry headed? And the big difference with our conference compared to many other conferences in financial services, company conferences, the FPA is most conferences are pay to play. So whoever writes the biggest check gets to be on stage. And we don't take sponsors. So your registration fee goes directly into the speaker budget. And we set the agenda. We hire the speakers. So we had Michael Kitces kick the conference off, who many of you know, did a fantastic job. We had leaders from healthcare, because there is an intersection between financial services and healthcare that's occurring. And maybe we'll talk about that in a different podcast. But anyway, we drive the agenda. We pay the speakers. We take no sponsors, and that gives us a lot of freedom and latitude to make sure that we get forward-thinking people on stage, not pushing product, not selling something, really talking about where they see the industry headed. Last year, at our conference, we had an undersecretary from the Department of Labor. Because remember, the Department of Labor ruling was there. It was big news. Now it's not all of a sudden. So next year it'll be, we don't have the exact dates yet, but you'll you can go to our website and we'll post those dates here soon. It's only a Wednesday afternoon and a Thursday morning. So it's a quick conference. We have probably 8 or 10 speakers. We take everybody to dinner Wednesday night. That's part of your registration fee. And you're learning as much from your colleagues in the audience as you are from people on stage.
Sounds terrific, Chuck. And I would like to, offer to promote your conference as well to my audience. And by this time next year, we'll be even bigger in size. But
you have 100,000 people listening to you.
Well, I actually am approaching 10,000 downloads, and 100,000 is a pretty daunting number, but it is going to happen. It's just a process.
It will happen.
Of momentum. So appreciate that. Hey, so I have a couple of signature questions, Chuck, that I ask everyone that comes on this show. So I'd like to do that to you. And they're just kind of like knee-jerk reaction type questions. No wrong answer. But you do have some stiff competition. There's been some great answers that have been given over the year that I've been doing this. Here's the first one. Chuck, you're there in your office or you're in your car, wherever you are, and you pick up the telephone, and on the other end of the telephone is a 30-year-old Chuck Wachendorfer. What advice do you give to your 30-year-old self?
Great question. My advice to my 30-year-old self would be to do a better job of balancing your life outside of work. I was very work focused in my 30s. My wife was super supportive of me through that whole period of my life. As balanced as I thought I was on a mission. And for most of us, hopefully we have a long life ahead of us. And so I think I probably would have kept a better perspective on life outside of work. Awesome.
Great work. Great. That's a great answer. Question number 2. Chuck, if you could have any superpower, which would it be and what would you do with it?
Wow. The superpower I would like would be to be able to redo or undo my mistakes. So if I could go back in time and fix some of the things that I've done, I'd take that as a superpower. I think unfortunately we all have things that we regret in life. I certainly have plenty to be grateful for. I've had fantastic success, but there are certainly mistakes I've made that I wish I could go back and redo.
We call it the eraser man. You're the eraser man. You can erase all the blemishes.
Yeah.
I will tell you though, Steven Tyler.
Although I will say that sometimes we learn from our biggest mistakes, as I hope I have.
Yeah.
Right. So if I didn't make mistakes, I maybe would have denied myself the growth and opportunity to learn from them. I have a saying that the school of experience has expensive tuition.
Indeed. I was going to say that Steven Tyler, Aerosmith frontman, and Joe Rogan had a discussion on a podcast recently, and they kind of came to this, quiet understanding. And the theory was is that perfection is not beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Perfection is not beautiful. It takes the blemishes. It takes the appreciation of the highs and lows, of the ups and the downs to do that. So, well, very good. Well, you know what?
I think that's what makes success in anything like marriage, business, is I think it was what makes you so appreciative or grateful is all the bumps, bruises, wrong turns, mistakes, pitfalls, potholes you had to go through to get there.
Absolutely. What's in the sausage. You built the sausage. Chuck, I appreciate those kind of honest and open answers to my signature questions. And as we wrap up, I would just like to personally thank you. You were an inspiration to me. I'm sure that you were to hundreds of people, but I'm only concerned with with what I can control, as you mentioned. And you helped me in an interesting transition to stay involved, along with Ken Delgaletto was a huge influence on my success. And you may remember, maybe you don't, but I actually came to you at a market group meeting, a little sidebar, and I said, hey, I'm thinking I'm going to go and be a wholesaler. And you kind of were like a little taken back, and you're like, huh, because I was on my way to become successful as a new P2 advisor. And you looked me in the eye and you said, you know what, you're going to learn a lot either way. Go out there and learn as much as you possibly can, and whatever you're going to do, basically be awesome at it. Now, you didn't use that word, but you kind of gave me that, call it Uncle Chuck, pat on the back, go get him, kid. And, we'll worry about Bobby Whalen's, advisor count number later, kind of a thing. So I appreciate you saying that to me and giving me the courage and the confidence to actually pull the trigger. It was a tough decision to make. And I'm sure that I can thank you on behalf of the advisors, not only in, the entire system, but especially in Metro Detroit and in Michigan, guys like Paul Giles, guys like Bomarito, guys that I'm sure that you were real brothers with during those dark days back at the turn of the millennium. And I'm sure they would say thanks. Tom Smith, these are my people. And
all great guys, great people.
Just salt of the earth kind of guys. And I'm sure that I can thank you on their behalf as well. And then I'd like to thank you for your work that you're doing now. Currently, the stuff that you and Doug and then now Dan are going to be doing really is impactful. It really means something to not thousands, but really millions of people, because each financial advisor, each wholesaler, each corporate executive that you help will help thousands of people themselves along their path. So thanks a lot for doing that. It's meaningful work. I appreciate it. I admire it, and I respect it. So thank you for doing that.
Mike, I really, it's very kind, and it's really nice to see you doing so well.
Thanks,
you don't always know sometimes the impact that you have on other people. Sometimes you know, sometimes you don't know. And so we all like to know that what we do actually matters and makes a difference, not just for ourselves, but for other people. So I appreciate you saying that. I'm glad that you're doing as well as you are. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks again, Chuck. Thanks for being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience Podcast. Mr. Chuck Wachendorfer has provided us a ton of value. If you'd like to, you can hit his website, thinktoperform.com, and there's just a plethora of things out there. My favorite place to see Chuck, though, is on YouTube. He is the poster boy. He is the runner-up to the most interesting man in the world contest. But there's some great value, free content that's on there. And when in doubt, remember to just, when you're stressed, freeze for success. So with that, we'll bring this one to a close. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can go ahead and share it with your colleagues. You can definitely leave likes and comments. I do look at all of them and try to answer any questions that you post me there. The show is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Appreciate everyone for listening. Thanks for supporting the show. And most of all, thanks for being awesome. Bye, everybody.